Hello everyone, this is Sumant. In this video, let's discuss the difference between functional programming and object-oriented programming. So, these are the different types of programming paradigms, or we can say these are the different types of styles, right? Different styles of writing a program. So, these two are two different ways of writing a program. So, let's discuss in which way these are better, and let's discuss the pros and cons of this functional programming and object oriented programming. So both has its own advantages and disadvantages. Let's discuss all those things. So first let's discuss functional programming. So we have already discussed functions, right? So what is functions? Generally we used to define functions by using def keyword, and we will write certain code in that function, and we used to return the output. So in similar way, functional programming is nothing but dividing a particular task into subtasks, and for every subtask we used to write a function. For example, let's say if you are doing a project and if you want to write code for that, then we can't write everything in single page, right? Everything we can't write, right? So what we can do, we will just divide that program into subtasks, and after dividing that, we used to write for every subtask we used to write a particular function, and we will link that function to next function. That's how this functional programming works. Functional programming, where we used to divide the program into subtasks and we used to write every subtask as a function. So that's the functional programming. There is another style of writing program, that is object oriented programming. Before discussing this object oriented programming, we have to discuss object. So what is object? Object is nothing but a laptop is an object, and mouse is an object, phone is an object, and pen is an object. Everything is an object, right? So in similar way, in programming, even in Python, integer is an object, and list, tuple, string, everything what we write, variable, everything we used to write in the form of everything is an object. So when we hear the word Python, what comes to our mind first? Python is an object oriented programming language. It means everything we used to represent in terms of objects, right? So in object oriented programming, we used to write everything in form of, like, first we used to define some classes, right? If there is a program, and we will divide that program into subtasks, and for every subtask, in previous case we have written functions, right? Here we used to define classes, and if you want to use that class, and we can just assign an object, and like we can just initialize an object for that class, and we can use that class. So that's how this object oriented programming language works. The difference between this functional and object oriented means, even in the way they store the values. In functional programming, we call that as variables. If you just store if you just take a value and if you assign something, we call that as variable. And in object oriented programming, we call that as
attributes,
right? And in functional programming, we used to call, if you write any function, we used to call that as function. But in object oriented programming, we used to call that as method. Complete logic, everything is same, but the main difference is the way we call that, and also the structure of that programming. Only that is different. And even there are some advantages for functional programming, and even there are some advantages and disadvantages for object oriented programming. So if you take functional programming, if you have a simple program, if you want to write a simple program, it will be very easy to functional programming. It means it won't be much complex. But if you take object oriented programming, if you want to write code using this object oriented programming, so it looks bit complex. And even in object oriented programming, we have a lot of advantages, like there are some concepts like inheritance, encapsulation, polymorphism, data abstraction, and even the type of variables we can choose, like public variable, protected variables. We can just, the data, even you can maintain the security, right? So there are some advantages and disadvantages in functional and also object oriented programming. Mainly in industry, if you want to write a code, we generally follow object-oriented programming. So that's the difference between functional programming and object-oriented programming. In my next video, I will start this object-oriented programming. I will try to explain, I will start from classes and objects, what is classes and what is objects, and how to create classes and objects. And previously I have discussed it, right? Inheritance, encapsulation, polymorphism, data abstraction, duck typing, this private, protected and public variables. Let's discuss all those things in upcoming videos. So that's all for this video. So this is a short video explaining the difference between this functional and object-oriented programming. I hope you got an idea of what this functional and object-oriented programming does. So what's this object-oriented programming and functional programming, and what's the differences and what's the advantages of those. So that's it for this video. If you understood the video, like the video, and if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, and thanks for watching.